A tale from Fiji Islands. The giant with teeth of fire. Long, long ago, in a cave high up on the side of one of the mountains of Rotuma, there lived a giant. He was not an ordinary giant. He was a fearsome and terrifying to behold, for his teeth burned like coals of fire. Every time he opened his mouth, heat like furnace blasted out from his mouth. If he drew back his huge lips in one of his frightful smiles, the glare from his burning teeth outshone the sun. Fortunately, most of the time the giant slept in his cave, but sometimes he roused himself and strode down the mountain. He'd open his mouth and breathe out streams of heat and flame. He would grin in all directions and singe the leaves of trees with the glare of his blazing teeth. The villagers who lived on the lower slopes of the mountains by the sea ran away whenever they saw the giant approaching. They dreaded his coming. They prayed that he would sleep forever in his cave. Some of the brave young men looked with longing at the fire which streamed from the teeth of the giant. In those days, the people of Rotuma did not know how to make fire. If only we could steal a little fire from the giant, how pleasant life would be, thought the young men. Our women would cook delicious meals. We could have warmth and light in the chill of the dark nights. So the bravest and the most daring of the young men of Rutuma gathered together. They took bundles of dried coconut palm leaves and crept cautiously up the side of the mountain towards the cave of the giant. Outside the cave, they stood and listened. There was no sound. Feeling very brave, they crept into the cave. There lay the giant, sound asleep and breathing deeply. With every outward breath, his huge, thick lips parted, letting out a glow of light from his burning teeth. With every puff of breath, tongues of flame bubbled out into the cave, only to be sucked back into that enormous mouth. The brave young men crept forward, using the light from the giant's teeth to see the stones on the cave floor. They did not want to stumble or make a noise. Closer and closer they crept. At last, the young men were able to hold out the bundles of dried leaves so that the little flames dancing around the giant's mouth reached them and set them alight. Then the young men lit a wood fire from the burning leaves. At last they could eat cooked food and keep warm. Meanwhile, the giant stood outside the cave. He pushed at the rock. He stamped. He shouted. The rock did not move. The giant breathed fire over the rock, but it stayed in one piece. Then the giant had an idea. He bent close to the rock and called in a sweet voice, "Let us be friends. Pull the rock aside so that I may sing to you." The young men did not believe for a moment that the giant desired to be friends, but they did not wish to stay in their cave forever. Let us humor him and perhaps he will go away, they said. The brave young men moved the rock, making a small gap at the entrance to their cave. At once the giant tried to push in his head, but it did not fit. That is not wide enough, he said. You will never hear my lovely song through the narrow hole. Push the boulder further aside. By this time, the brave young man had thought of a plan. Very well, they called. They pushed the rock to one side so that the giant could easily thrust his head into the cave. The giant drew in a deep breath and thrust his head forward, ready to open his mouth and breathe out flames and heat from his burning teeth. Soon there will be nothing left of these impudent young men but cinders, he thought. But he was wrong. The moment the giant's head was through the gap, the young men rolled the rock forward, crushing the giant's head flat. The giant was dead. His flaming teeth spluttered and grew cold and dark. The young men ran from the cave shouting and calling the people from all villages around. We have killed the giant, they laughed. His teeth no longer burn with fire, but the fire is not lost. We have it. Now life will be pleasant for us all. The brave and the generous young men shared the flames with everyone on the island. Soon a fire blazed in every hut, and the lovely smell of cooking yams and fish filled the air. Perhaps, best of all, the islanders no longer lived in fear of the giant with teeth of fire. End of the story.